Mike Signorelli, you are senior pastor of V1 Church in New York City. How's it going today?
Hey, it's a great day here in Queens. I'm in New York City. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right, the reason I'm having you on, we're diving into this topic of Turning Red, this new Pixar and Disney movie. Now, you put out a fairly long video on this, a really interesting commentary on the film, and you said a number of things, but one thing you said was, this is not a children's movie. What led you to that conclusion?
Well, I believe that every parent, not just a pastor, but a parent has a mandate to actually screen material, because every single device you have in your home is a portal, either a window into the things of God or unfortunately things that I believe are demonic. And so, as a pastor and a parent, I have an elementary school aged kid. I was like, this is a Pixar film. It's obviously going to be watched by millions and millions of people. I want to know what I'm exposing my kid to. And within the first 8 minutes, I was absolutely appalled.
So let's talk about those first 8 minutes. And by the way, in your video, you really go, you show clips, you go in depth on this, but what was the thing that disturbed you the most at the beginning of the film?
Yeah, well, full disclosure, the video's already been banned on YouTube in all countries, which was kind of to be expected. I took a risk and just felt like I had a responsibility to share the theological perspective on this. It's still up on Facebook for the time being. We'll see how long that lasts. But, really it's giving like an Eastern perspective. And so the problem though I have is that, number one, it's a coming of age piece. And so it's essentially about a girl experiencing, her monthly cycle. And then as a result of that, there's all this spiritual connection to, ancestral communication, which is communication with the dead. We know in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27, it's appointed once to live and then to die, and we face judgment. And it's strictly forbidden in the Christian context to communicate with the dead. And so even within the first 8 minutes, you have chanting, communication with ancestors, and immediately a red flag should start to go off. But unfortunately, there's millions of parents who are Christians, and they'll not even know that their kid's watching it in the other room, and let alone even have the red flag to say, do I want my kid to be exposed to this as a gateway into maybe future adult interactions and beliefs with something that the Christian faith condemns?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I know I've seen some people react and say, okay, well, a lot of Disney movies, a lot of, animated movies have these elevated themes, have, elements of maybe not the occult, but I guess magic or make believe. What do you think sort of makes this film maybe different from some of the other ones out there?
Yeah, well, here, what I didn't want to do is become a viral meme of the Christian that's trying to cancel Disney, that overly emotional, radicalized Christian that all of your friends and coworkers can't stand. And I even said in my video, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this. I have already, but there's many more who are thanking me saying, my discernment needs to increase. And that was really my hope and prayer. But here's the thing, there's definitely a tipping point, and there's a moment where you're like, they've gone too far. Now, if you extract the spiritual aspect of this movie, just on the basis of the content of being about, menstruation and this coming of age, it's not appropriate for children on that. I'm secularly educated. I have an English degree. I taught journalism and English. I can look at things from a secular perspective. Just on that basis alone, it's not appropriate for children. But again, now when you go past the 8-minute mark into the 15-minute mark, there's this whole nightmare sequence. And I'm telling you, it's disturbing to children, whether they're Christians or not, because the whole basis of it is demonic in its presentation. You have like ancestors with glowing red eyes. I showed the footage, which is probably why it got blocked on YouTube. But then you even have spirits, literally these two demonic entities come out of a portrait and begin to swirl around. And this girl's being tortured, this child in her sleep. And it's just wildly inappropriate. And again, it should be offensive. But I think what happens is we're so desensitized that over time, things that used to be offensive to Christians, unfortunately, I think that we've become accepting of them and we ignore it. And that's really why I felt a burden to put the word out about this movie.
Yeah, I mean, the other day, it's interesting. I was in Barnes and Noble and, I'm shopping and there's board games out and there's the Ouija board right in the middle of the board games, right? It's just prominently displayed in the middle of it. And I thought, wow, that's really, I don't remember. Of course, it's been in stores, but I didn't remember seeing it so prominently displayed. It seems like a lot of these different themes, which maybe in and of themselves, a one off here or there might not seem concerning to people. But when you collectively sort of look, it seems like these sorts of themes that we're talking about, regardless of where people stand on this particular film, they're becoming more prevalent and more present in our lives. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think you just nailed it because I have a 15-year-old daughter. And as a 15-year-old, she's a teenager just interacting with the world. The other day, she said, Dad, why is it okay to be everything except for a Bible believing Christian right now? And that's what those are the words of my 15-year-old. And she said, Disney represents all cultures except for biblical Christianity and even other religions. And it's all represented in their film, but you won't see an overt Christian. And she's picking up on the bias. The other thing is one of the lead contributors to Teen Vogue is a practicing open witch. And she actually has an article, it was released 2 years ago now, about the practical magic behind teenage menstruation blood. And so you see these themes and the connection to the occult, to witchcraft. And again, my daughter can read Teen Vogue magazine. She's not going to read scripture, but she can have an entire article about witchcraft connected to menstruation. And I'm not saying this for shock value. It's just me simply telling parents, this is what your kids are being exposed to, whether you realize it or not. And when you look at Exodus chapter 22, verse 18, Leviticus chapter 20, verse 6, you have a very strict ban and prohibition on sorcery, witchcraft, and God did not change. Like the new covenant did not eliminate, that restriction, that banning of operating and being exposed to these things. And when I think about the nation of Israel, ancient Israel had bordering countries and nations that were involved in witchcraft and sorcery. And God was like, it's possible to be in relationship with them and not actually co-opt and begin to be involved in the practices that they're doing. And so, listen, we're not going to create our own little Christian bubble. It's possible to be in relationship with people, but it's what the problem occurs is when there's this mixing. And right now you see that Christians are reading their Bible, but also reading horoscopes. You see Christians who are, believing God for deliverance and freedom from demons, but also going into and burning sage to cleanse their home. There's this intermingling that's happening. And I think this Pixar Disney situation is just another one of those gateway experiences. And to me, that should be so scary to those who don't know this is going on until they heard this talk right now.
Well, and to your point, there have been a number of write-ups and in a number of outlets about the fact that Gen Z, obviously we know about the depression, we know about all those issues. There's also this thirst for the spiritual connection, though. We know as Christians that that's what God puts in us, right? To connect with something, with him. And so people try to fill that void in all different ways. And one of the ways it's being filled, and again, people can Google this, they can look it up. There have been plenty of stories in outlets that are not necessarily Christian outlets. They are turning to tarot cards. They're turning to all of these other things. And one other point about what you were just saying, in the Old Testament, we obviously have the prohibitions. If you look to the New Testament and you go to Acts 16, one of the most fascinating stories that I had looked past so many times as I was reading was this slave woman who is following Paul around, driving him crazy. And she's a fortune teller. Her owners would use her, right, to tell people's fortunes. What does Paul do? He expels the demons. She loses the ability to tell fortunes. And so you again see that showing up. It clearly was not a gift that she had been given to be able to do that. And Paul took it away from her by expelling the demons. So we see it throughout both the old and the new. Let me ask you this. When you take all of the spiritual concerns away from the film, let's just push them to the side for a minute. There were a number of other moments in the film as well. You mentioned one of them. I believe I heard the word stripper at one point in the movie as well. What are some of those elements that parents should also, just from strictly a not being appropriate for kids perspective?
Absolutely. Here's the thing. The whole premise is this coming of age. And we all know it's common for teenagers to rebel against parents. The problem with the plot of this movie is that there's even a line at the end that says my panda, my body, my panda. And, because the whole thing is like, the what it means to become a woman is this red panda, this other persona, this fierce. And so this is the problem I had. There's this embracing of that side and saying like, hey, I like to gyrate and dance this way. I like to do these things that you think are bad, you think are wrong, but I'm going to embrace that and do it anyways. So there's just what it's literally teaching your kids is, hey, I lie to you, but that it's okay because that's who I am. I dance in this sexually overt way, but you're just going to have to be okay with it because that's who I am. And it's that secular humanistic worldview that says there is no wrong or right anymore. It's like, hey, mom, this is my truth. This is what's right for me. But if you are a Bible believing Christian, this should be screaming red flags like turn this off, stop brainwashing your kids with this. The Bible declares there is a right and there is a wrong, and Mike Signorelli's not the standard of it. God is, and his word is. And the whole movie, when you get to the climax at the end, which by the way, the whole climax of this movie, the spoiler alert, is this massive ritual with this pentagram-esque circle that begins to illuminate, and these demon spirits in the form of a panda coming out of them and doing all this stuff. I mean, it goes from like, if you were like, I don't think this is demonic, like if you get to this scene, you're like, okay, there's no denying it. But then beyond that, there's this embracing of, hey, I did all these wrong things, but this is who I am.
Mm.
And, as a good parent, you just cannot co-sign that message. It's so dangerous. And I want to say one quick thing, it all culminates to this song, and there's this band that comes out, and it's just like, I was thinking about Daniel when, there was this idol worship, and it said that in Babylon, there would be a song that would play. And every day that song would play, and it would summon up this ritual of we're all going to bow down before this idol. And Daniel said, I'm fasting. I'm not going to do that. I serve the God of Israel. And it's so crazy to me that today these movies have the songs, and it's like trying to get you to bow down to the idolatry of worship of self, because that's essentially the worldview of this movie. And it's funny because so many parents are commenting on my post saying, my kid is watching this thing 2 to 5 times a day on repeat. And so what you're getting is not the song, but the ideology behind the movie. And the song is like the desire. Repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. This stuff is so dangerous.
Well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time to break it down. Where can people find out more about you and your ministry?
Yeah, for now, I'm going to say for now, you can find me on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel so you never miss a live stream. I had a significant number of people watching this video live before it was taken down. So find me on YouTube and subscribe to my channel.
Thanks so much, Mike. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for helping me get the word out for so many more.